can support this. Mahalo.
Thank you very much. Okay. At the bottom of the page, did I skip any? House Bill 2232 and Senate Bill 2578. I guess, again, Senator Baker, if you could speak to this one.
This is another measure that a student brought. This happened to be a male med student, and he was appalled when he discovered that this practice was going on, and I was horrified. I had somewhat of a similar experience many, many years ago when I was working in D.C. and had to be in the hospital, but I thought that had gone by the boards because so much time had passed. What this bill does is prohibit a physician, surgeon, medical student from performing a pelvic examination on an anesthetized or unconscious female without informed consent, unless there are specific reasons for having to do that and consent cannot be obtained. But basically, when you are in a teaching hospital, you have to give consent to have the residents and the med students be part of your care team. But this is an additional consent that we think is appropriate. I suspect that most women would be consenting because it helps the students, it helps them get an important treatment, and I'm told by practitioners that it's better if a woman in that situation is anesthetized. But I just think, and I hope all of you will agree, that in this age of trying to involve patients in their health care, that it should be fundamental, that it's informed consent and not just done without even thinking about it. Thank you.
So can I speak to it for sure?
If you call me a victim, but I'm one that went through it, and I got to tell you, it is sexual abuse. And I was out. They woke me up in the middle of the night at 2 in the morning. I was already on drugs, ready for my surgery. I had a gallbladder surgery. And it was sexual abuse. And so I do think that people don't think this stuff goes on. It does.
On the page after that, there are 3 bills that are actually related to trafficking. The House Bill 2233, Senate Bill 2575, House Bill 2234, Senate Bill 2579, House Bill 2235, Senate Bill 2576. And you can read the description of these. We don't have the specific people to speak to these bills, but they hopefully will be heard, and hopefully we'll be able to support, we'll get support for them this year. I'd like to move on to the resolutions because our time is getting a little bit short, and these are actually the pieces of legislation that relate to veterans. I see Ann Freed is getting up. She's going to speak to House Resolution 11 and HCR 17. This requests the U.S. Congress to support the immediate repeal of combat exclusionary rules as contrary to good order and discipline and as the humane and ethical course of action. Requests the U.S. Congress to support the repeal of combat exclusionary rules. Ann, can you explain that? Oh, okay. Roz wanted me to mention that Senate companions are also going to be introduced. They're just not here yet. So you only have the HRs here, but you will have the SRs and the SCRs.
Well, hi everyone, and especially thanks to military members for being here. My name is Ann Freed. I am co-chair of the Hawai'i Women's Caucus, Coalition, also under the Women's Democratic Party Caucus, and also a 28-year veteran of the Army, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel. And I came from Women's Army Corps to fully integrated volunteer Army. And we've been talking for a long time about the discriminatory effects of combat exclusionary rules. And most folks, you know, because in voluntary Army we're all out of sight, out of mind, and women in particularly are out of sight, out of mind, don't know what this means in terms of rape on the battlefield, in terms of sexual harassment. So the effect of the combat exclusionary rule for all those of us who've been in the military for a while now, particularly for combat veterans, is not to exclude us from combat, because, oh, by the way, we're in combat. You know, we sat and listened to two women talk who had been raped, come and talk to this group of women at the legislature. Tore my heart out, because it made me ashamed of the military for the first time in a very, very long time. It's not the military I knew. So what has happened is, you know, one of these women was the M60 machine gunist for her, you know, convoy when she went out. What has happened is that women are in combat roles, they're in direct combat, and there are, because of combat exclusionary rules, there are very few senior women, senior non-commissioned officers and senior officers in positions of power in the battlefield, in particular in the battlefield. So the statistic that was given to the Oversight Committee at Congress was 1 in 3 women being raped on the battlefield. That's disgraceful. And one of the things that can be done is the immediate repeal of the combat exclusionary rule, because eventually that will result in women officers in senior positions and women NCO in senior positions, and the more women we have in those positions, the less likely rapists are to get away with it. Unfortunately, male commanders are literally under the gun. They do not, under the gun, in combat, necessarily understand or sympathize with what a rape victim is going through. You know, and I don't think that's unique. I mean, if a male soldier gets sick, you know, that's kind of a hassle too when you've got war going on. But women, particularly because women understand women, need to have senior women leaders to turn to on the battlefield. So I think this is a must, and I really thank the Women's Legislative Caucus for putting this forward. Thank you.